It's May 4th, so may the 4th be with you today. And to mark 4th of May, we've got Late Night Banter Season 2. It returns. But forget this Darth Vader stuff. I mean, this is such a bind. I mean, what we're talking about here is a bit of banter with me, Del Singh. Yep, Darth Vader really is Indian, as you'd imagine. Although, to be fair, he was an absent father. You don't get too many absent fathers when it comes to Indians. In fact, fathers are seldom absent. They're always there when you least expect them. And if you don't do what they say, you'll get the thuppud. Forget cutting your hand off and so on, you'll get a thuppud, which is probably just as bad. So listen, fathers, we've got to love them. They are our lifeblood, as indeed our mothers and so on. So remember, it's all about banter. Banter, I am your father, and let banter commence.
To you, what would you think about? Brighton? A guy called Morgan sitting on a seat in breakfast TV, best friend Donald Trump, nothing is smuggled like that guy. But no, Piers, House of Lords. And that's where we are today, to interview my guest, Baroness Warsi, who is at the House of Lords. She invited me to her house. What a great house. Yeah, honestly, I live in a semi. But seriously, Saida, thank you very much for inviting us here today.
My pleasure.
Can I call you Saida? Because I keep calling you Baroness Warsi. I'm going to have to curtsy or bang my head on the table.
Yeah, you can just call me. You can call me my lady if you want. That's the kind of formal term.
Oh, okay.
But you can call, for this program, you can call me Saida.
I'll call you Saida. There you go. That's it. Phew, dodged a bullet on that one, didn't I? Right. So I have to tell you, this is an awesome setting here and so on. And by the way, security need to actually check our stuff when we go out because I'm going to nick some of your furniture. But no, but seriously, thank you very much for inviting us to the House of Lords today. We know you've got a hectic schedule. Now, as well as being Baroness Saida Warsi, you're actually a northern working class mum. That's your title. You said that.
Yeah, it is. Because ultimately, look, there are so many different parts to our identity.
Yeah.
And for me, and like so many people who grew up, I'm now 47.
We can edit that bit out.
No, it's all right. I'm proud of being 47. And I think for me, growing up, so many of us wanted to keep the different aspects of our life separate. So we had like our little Asian family thing going on, and then we had our work life and our, friend life. And I suppose as I've got older, I just think, well, this is me. These are all the different identities that make me, and you have to try and...
And rightly so, you're proud of, firstly, being a mum, I suppose, being a parent, being a grandparent in my case, is always something to be proud of. But, you obviously draw on your working class northern roots fairly heavily, and it's something you're very proud of. And I guess when we sit in such sort of auspicious surroundings where people all think about privilege and so on, many people viewing will probably think, hang on a second, how do you get to the House of Lords unless you've taken a wrong turn? You must have come from a privileged background, but clearly you didn't. And I think your family kind of came from that working class background. So what was it like growing up in the 70s in kind of Yorkshire for a young Pakistani girl?
Well, I had when I was born, before I was born, Dad used to work in the mills.
Okay.
And then when I was born, Dad became a bus conductor, and I knew there was real celebration in the house because Dad's life had improved.
Yeah. We can get cheap bus travel.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we did get cheap bus travel. You know what used to happen? So I'm sure we were part of the kind of babysitting service. So I'm one of 5. So you can imagine as each kind of child arrived and my mum's hands were full. Yeah. And then I remember when Dad went on to become a bus driver.
Okay.
So things got even better.
Wow.
And we actually thought it was his bus. Because Mum would send us off toddling up the street and she'd say, go to the top of the street, and your dad's bus will arrive. And we'd take him his lunch. Bus. Yeah, exactly. So we'd just be waiting there thinking it was Dad's bus. And then we'd jump onto the bus, and he'd give us a little drive around and then drop us off on the way back. It was a typical working class upbringing, typical you know, Muslim, Punjabi upbringing,
Okay.
where, you know, you had certain rules that you had to live by.
Of course.
And I think it was really what shaped me and what formed
great.
me. That real sense of debate and discussion and you know, argument was very much growing up, was part of growing up.
That's
And
just
I
a
think,
regular Asian household.
well, it is, exactly.
Argument.
Exactly.
Argument. God, you know, sorry, politicians know nothing about argument. Go to an Indian or Pakistani household, you'll get argument
Exactly.
without
and
paying for it.
especially in the north. I think, you know, there's a very specific Yorkshire personality.
Okay.
People always say to me, which is your kind of overriding part of your personality? And I
It's
genuinely
Yorkshire.
do believe being born and raised in Yorkshire formed the person that I eventually became.
Brilliant. So, and just, you know, going into your childhood and so on, you know, what would you say were the good things, the fun things you really enjoyed about your childhood?
I think
Apart from your dad's bus.
apart from dad's, but having a big family, I'm one of 5 girls.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
that in itself was kind of interesting and fun because you always had friends around you. Having the freedom, I'm a second child.
Okay.
So my elder sister was always really, really sensible one, helping mum in the kitchen. And I was the one that was just allowed to run wild and roam the streets and do what I really wanted to do. And I think in that sense, you know, having that freedom just to be able to, we had woods not far from our house, you know, we played out all the time, created dens, you know, all sorts of interesting things. I used to read Enid Blyton, like everything, every Famous Five book, every Secret Seven book, and I actually so wanted to be one of the Famous Five. That was the world I wanted.
And there were 5 of you, so
And there were 5
of you. It's brilliant. It all worked perfectly, and I guess there must have been a massive amount of sibling rivalry. All girls, did you say?
All girls.
All girls.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so, you know, something I mean that resonates with me as someone that grew up in the 70s. I mean, yeah, we did kind of make our own entertainment and have fun because we didn't have games, and the TV had 3 channels, and it was either black and white, or in the 70s we finally got colour. But you know, we actually used to go out to, they say, parks and places and so on, and also I guess we felt safe with things that I regretted my kids couldn't do, and certainly my grandkids can't do. You can't let them out these days, along those lines, which is a shame. But that's pretty good. So you mentioned your dad obviously worked in the mills and then went onto the buses, and obviously your mum was obviously building the home and stuff. So would you say that your politics was kind of influenced by the background that you came from that sort of very working class background?
I think the strongest influence in terms of my politics was a sense of wanting to get on in life. And I think the 2 overriding things which were obvious to us as kids were hard work. You know, mum worked incredibly hard, so she didn't just run the house, she worked as a seamstress. She did all sorts of homeworking, you know, making up all sorts of, you know, interesting
mums
things.
don't get a look in sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Fair play.
And so, you know, she would do lots of piecework at home. And dad worked incredibly long hours, went on to become a cab driver, set up his own business, but carried on cabbing whilst his business was being established. And I think that sense of hard work. And the second was almost a sense of shame is probably the right word, where my parents always said to us that you do not rely upon the state, and it's got to be a point of last resort. And I remember dad saying to us, and I don't ever want you standing in that queue for the social security. And so I think these 2 things, a sense of work hard and don't ever rely upon the state unless you absolutely necessarily have to, were probably the 2 things that formed my politics.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it is that you know, I know in our cultures, the word in honour is probably the translation of that. But there's honour in various things, and honour in hard work was probably one of the key ethics I know that was drummed into me, and likewise by the sound of it. Now, clearly, you did a lot of reading. You're obviously a bit of a swot, which is good because you like your school by the sound of it. Which
I did. I was a nerd.
Yeah, and I too. So great. So you know, no friends, but there you go. What do you do? What do you do?
Who told you I had no friends? Who's been speaking to you?
The friends I never had told me I had no friends, honestly. But seriously, you obviously finished at school, but then you went on to university. Now, back in those days, you know, a Pakistani girl going to university wasn't an everyday occurrence, was it?
It wasn't. I mean, Asian girls going to university was just not an everyday occurrence. And
so how did you get over that?
And I think for us, there were 2 things. One, I think because we were all girls, that was it. So my parents had to invest in what they got. And maybe if we'd been 3 girls and 2 boys, the boys would have gone to university and we may not have. So in a way, not having boys has been a great blessing in our family. But secondly, I think there was a sense that it was an economic reality decision for my mum, certainly, because she felt there's all these girls, there's only dad, they don't have any brothers, nobody's going to really help them up, you know, with problems if they ever have financial issues. And she used to say, I can either not send you to university and you can earn X pounds an hour, or I can send you to university and you can earn 3 times as much an hour. And therefore, from a pure economic future-proofing our lives, that's why she sent us to university.
And good on them. Good.
And I also
good
think
move.
she thought nobody'd marry us if we didn't have a degree. She probably thought our marriage prospects increased if we went off to university.
Yeah, exactly.
She's a bit like Mrs. Bennett, actually, off Pride and Prejudice. Yeah. Make them beautiful, make them clever.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is not a bad thing to do. So, when you went to university and so on, you kind of, I guess, became kind of more politically aware and politically active. Did you kind of find that's where your interest in politics started?
I got involved in student politics. I became vice president of the Students' Union at college. I went on lots of demonstrations, photos of which I now hope will never ever materialise.
So what were you demonstrating against then? Go on, I'm going to ask that question.
Weirdly, 2 things. First of all, grants not loans, which now seems very topical in light of where we are.
Isn't it just?
And poll tax. It was the kind of world that I grew up in. So very much. That's kind of protest politics, and then you grow up, I suppose, in some ways.
You never got arrested, by the way.
I didn't know. I spent a lot of time in police stations and prison cells, but as a lawyer, not as a defendant. So my mum used to hate it. When I finally qualified as a lawyer, and she'd have friends around, I'd say, "Oh, Mum, I've really got to go because I have to go to the police station." She'd say, "Will you stop telling people you go to the police?" Because there was almost a shaming being at the police station from the old kind of Punjabi culture.
Yeah, there is.
And I'd say, "Mum, I'm going to the police station as a solicitor." She goes, "Yeah, but just the police station itself is a bad place for you to be talking about."
Just don't say that word.
Exactly.
Say I'm going out, but not the police station.
Exactly. So, I think, thankfully, never got arrested, never strayed on the wrong side of the law.
And when you kind of left university, you kind of went into your job, and was it by, as a solicitor, was it by chance that your boss at the time was MP for the area, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was another partner in that business who actually recruited me to that practice, not him.
Okay.
So I worked for the Crown Prosecution Service.
Right.
And then whilst I was there, the gentleman who eventually I ended up going into business with, actually, Michael, recruited me to this practice where he was a senior partner. And when I joined that practice, not long after that, he decided to go off and set up his own niche practice. And he asked me to come and join him and work for him. And me being cheeky, I said, "Well, I'm not going to work for you, but I'll work with you. So I'll come in as a partner and I want a stake in the cake." And that's where we set up business together. So in my mid-20s, I was running my own legal practice with him.
Right on. You obviously got gender equality and ethnic equality
and a good
all in one.
Head.
And a damn good business head. Exactly. I'm going to work. Yeah, not for you, but with you. Brilliant. And were you, apart from your mum not wanting you to tell people that you were going to the police station, were your family supportive about your move into politics?
Of course. Law as a profession, she fully supported. I think she hoped I'd done something like family law or maybe conveyancing.
All the clean stuff.
Yeah, rather than criminal defence work at 2:00 in the morning in the police stations.
Yeah.
But I think she, like people of that generation, felt that there were a series of professions that you could go into. And so she sat down with the 5 of us and kind of went teacher, lawyer, doctor, accountant, pharmacist.
They all come up, don't they?
Yeah, I think that's what we did. We didn't really have a choice.
Yeah.
I say to a lot of young girls, I said, I was of the generation where your mother chose both your profession and your husband. And you just accepted it because you didn't really have a choice.
Yeah, I work in the IT industry, and actually my late father, I'm become a salesman. It was, but it's what you did, Dad, and you were very good at it. So there you go. But it wasn't quite doctor, lawyer, whatever. But it was reasonably respectful. Now we're sitting here today in the House of Lords, and there's obviously going to be people watching this who probably don't know a great deal about the House of Lords. So I guess I've got to ask that question for the benefit of viewers. What is it that peers do at the House of Lords, and how do the things that you do affect people's ordinary lives?
Well, kind of the Noddy's Guide. You have the House of Commons, people that are elected as members of Parliament, and then you have the House of Lords, where people are appointed into Parliament.
Okay.
The House of Commons will make legislation, and the House of Lords tries to make that legislation better. So we're effectively a scrutinising chamber where we look at the legislation that's presented and we try and make it better. And occasionally we vote things down.
Right.
But a lot of the time we vote things down to try and make them better rather than stop things from happening altogether.
Okay.
Because we're not elected, it isn't our role to kind of get rid of things. It's our role to try and make things better.
And I guess it goes with the territory. You don't necessarily always succeed in making things better or doing that.
I would say the House of Lords is incredibly effective at scrutinising legislation because you have real experts.
Okay.
The quality of the debate, I can honestly say, is far better. It's less political. It's much more detailed.
Because obviously you've been on both sides. You've seen the House of Commons side of it, and obviously.
Well, I was never in the Commons, although I probably should have been because the age that I came here was not the age that you would normally come here. So the average age in the House of Lords is 69.
Well, I've seen quite a few of the folks there kind of pottering along. Bless them, they really do.
And people usually come here at the end of their kind of main careers because of their expertise. No, at the end of their main careers to expertise. And I came here at 36, which was quite a bizarre appointment. I became the youngest member of the House at the time.
Kind of almost juvenile person in this
exactly,
building.
and so you kind of, I suppose, in many ways, I was probably in the wrong house at that time. I fought a seat. I should have fought a seat again.
Okay.
But no, now I think in retrospect, 10 years on, over a decade on, I love this place.
Yeah, that's pretty good. But and in politics, as in business, there's a couple of things. Firstly, you're a woman from, I'm not big on the acronym, but BAME, but Black, Asian, minority, ethnic sort of background. Have things improved in that respect over the period that you've been kind of involved in politics and indeed business, or do you think there's more that needs to be done there?
Oh, there's still so much more that needs to be done. There isn't even proper representation of women. Never mind proper representation of BAME communities.
Really my next question. So hang on.
Right. Okay. So there isn't even proper representation of BAME communities. Have things changed? Yes, they have. I think both internally and externally from a community perspective. Certainly, when I stood over a decade ago, there were still questions being raised about whether it was appropriate for women, Asian women, Muslim women, to be standing in political leadership positions.
Now, can I stop you there and ask, when people would say that, would that be people from within the Asian community, or was that people from a broader community?
I think both.
Okay.
So there were parts of Dewsbury where I stood, which would always traditionally vote Conservative.
Okay.
Where on the doorstep, I faced real hostility where, one gentleman actually said to me, I'm not going to vote for a Paki. That was how bluntly it was put. We had the largest BNP vote anywhere in the country on that in 2005 in that seat where I stood. But on the same hand, a fairly traditional Muslim community, which I grew up in, would be rolling their eyes a little bit and say, well, is it appropriate for a Muslim woman to be in a leadership position? Is this even,
do we want her? Good Pakistani girl going wrong here.
Yeah, exactly. And, where have we failed? And so I think in that sense, on both sides, I always say that I was too female for half of them, too brown for the other half, and therefore there's nothing really I was going to do to be able to win, because I couldn't change either. But I think things have changed. If you look at the number of Asian women that have been elected to Parliament, Asian women now in the House of Commons, it's now certainly within communities, all Asian communities, seen as a positive move for women to get involved in politics. In the very ward where we were having these conversations within quite a conservative Muslim community, they elected a young woman to be their councillor, a young British Pakistani woman to be their councillor. So I think things have started to change, and I see so much. I say this over and over again. I meet some great, young male leaders, but then I meet some amazing young female leaders. And the powerhouse, certainly within the Asian community, I'm consistently reminded is going to be the women.
Brilliant. I must admit, I do actually ask my, guests, particularly those in the political spectrum, on the campaign trail, if they encounter what I'd call often fascism. And I know with a number of the Sikhs I've interviewed, obviously people see a beard, a turban and so on, and people immediately say, never going to, and you've obviously just articulated an example of that where somebody's very just downright and forthright with you, with a racial epithet to say that they wouldn't vote for you based on that sort of stuff. So it just reminds me of the BNP actually putting a thing through my letterbox to vote for their candidate, and they didn't realise that it was a darkie living in that house, and so I actually answered the door and I said to him, by the way, look, you need to take this back. And the guy was like, no, you keep it, you might learn something. I said, well, it's going straight to the loo. The Andrex will run out at some point in time. So now, we touched on gender equality or inequality as is happening, and sadly, it's in the news, it's everywhere. You can't get away from it, and so on. And the nice thing is, more and more things are being done to help, and like you say, you've got these powerhouse, these ladies that are kind of stepping up, and basically they're doing everything that guys can, and often better. So that's in the
Most often better.
No. I've seen that. You know,
That's what I'm saying. Most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did a thing the other day where I actually got to Stansted Airport, and there were like 7 guys queuing for cubicles, and honestly, these guys, it was like the world had ended, and I was thinking to myself, you know, women do this all the time because somebody never built enough loos for them, and they never complain. They just get on with it. But blokes, give them anything to complain about, they will complain. But just back to the question I was going to ask you was, you know, in terms of the gender inequality argument we've got over here, and we're having it in this country, and it's in the States and so on. Do you still have any sort of connections to Pakistan? And is that somewhere where you see this thing's probably not happening fast enough around gender equality or inequality?
I mean, I still travel around the kind of subcontinent, Indian subcontinent, and every community, every country is on a journey in terms of gender equality. I think traditionally what's always been the narrative has been that, you know, these brown folk over there are really bad to their women,
yeah.
and they haven't really civilized themselves enough to be able to deal with gender equality. And I think what the last 3-4 years have shown is actually you can be black or brown or white or
just Harvey Weinstein.
You can be in the White House, or you can be, you know, a guy who runs a cab company. Actually, men will always, when they have a position of authority, use that power to be able to abuse women if they can, and they can get away with it. And so therefore I think one of the issues that I've consistently raised is that we have to, you know, we've seen it in sport, we've seen it in celebrities, we've seen it in politics, we've seen it in Hollywood, we've seen it in communities, we've seen it in taxi ranks, we've seen it in takeaways. Actually, it's time for people to say that the, you know, gender inequality, but worse than that, actually, the, you know, power politics that is played out, usually through some form of sexual abuse or sexual violence with women, has got to stop. And we have to all be vigilant to that, and we have to be ready to, you know, to clamp it down wherever we see it.
It's interesting, you say that, because you know, I often get asked, people ask me, you know, as a Sikh, you know, oh, what's the Sikh standpoint on gender equality and so on, and you know, as you sort of say, these people will often think you guys as sort of suppress your women on purpose. And I sort of said, look, you know, from a top end, when, you know, with religions, and I guess it you know, may work in a lot of religions, is there is a degree of inequality. Sadly, when it filters down to a community level, you know, that's when it breaks down, because obviously communities are often led by men, and they think that that's the way forward, you know. So whether it's a temple or a mosque or a gurdwara, you know, we're going to run this show, and the women are going to kind of take the back seat, and that's just the way it's run. But as you say,
I think most faith communities, you know, look, the fact that in Britain, in, you know, 2014, we were having discussions around female bishops still. You know, and the Church of England was still resisting, sections of the Church of England were still resisting the need to have female bishops. I think means that every faith community has traditionally been led by males. And faith community organisations have been run by men, but I think more and more you're finding women are wanting to take their place. And we're starting to see a change. I mean, there's a really effective group that's been set up, Nisa Nisham, which is a Jewish and Muslim women's group. And one of the reasons when they were first having a discussion about coming together, I was part of those discussions, and I think the frustration that was felt on both sides was the fact that they felt that in their own community organisations, they were not being heard. That actually, in many ways, their problems were exactly the same. And therefore, they felt working together, they may have more influence than trying to do it alone.
Now, sitting in this wonderful place, but isn't there something that hereditary peers can only be male? Is that still something that sort of...
No, you can be female as well.
As a hereditary peer?
As a hereditary, yes.
Oh, right, okay.
So you can inherit that title, but they're more likely to be male simply because of the way that they pass their title down.
Okay, I'm going to have to update Wikipedia somewhere, because I did read on there that
No,
I
think you can definitely be female.
I thought it was hereditary peerages only could go to males, but if it came to females, even better. Now, gender equality is something that's obviously a cause...
The bigger challenge is the hereditary peers are more likely to be white.
Because
you know, how long will it be? I mean, there aren't many jobs which openly say this is not open to anybody of any colour. But actually, the hereditary peerage, by its very nature, in, you know, 100% of cases means that we're unlikely to have a black or brown hereditary peer for many, many years to come, unless somebody intermarries and then has a child.
Yeah, I was just about to say, unless
but it's going to take a long time.
Unless one of you guys have been playing away from home, in which case you've got to tell the missus about that sort of, child there that you shouldn't. But just going back to the gender inequality thing, and I believe is a cornerstone of the Warsi Foundation about unfairness in society, trying to level the playing field, I guess. Can you tell me a little bit more about the Warsi Foundation, what it does, and how it came about?
I think it was a number of us have been talking about certain issues that we want to make a difference on: social mobility, gender equality, religious equality, all of that kind of stuff. And I suppose the catchphrase we came was, how do you redefine tomorrow? How do you redefine what's going to happen in somebody's life? What are the interventions you need to do now to make a difference to their life? And I think that's really where the kind of thinking behind the foundation came. And probably some of the most effective bits of work that we've been doing is getting involved with children's lives around the age of 16, 17, 18 and changing the course of where the careers will end up. We're just running a program at the moment which is fascinating to watch, called The Unwritten Rules. And it's about all those things that nobody ever told you about before you applied for your first job or applied for promotion. There are lots of things which my kids now know simply because of the upbringing they've had and the fact that their parents have brought them up in a middle-class environment. And that middle-class filter that comes with success, most kids actually don't even know the rules of the game until they're halfway into their careers. So it's about, teaching them the art of networking, of small talk, of how you turn up at an interview, how to make your CV look best, what to wear when you turn up, how to kind of be nice right from the minute you're walking through the door to the...
But is it fair to say, our generation, I've done all this stuff with my children because I went through that process, and my parents never went through that process of going for a job interview or so on. As you say, maybe, if your father went for an interview at the bus depot, he didn't have to maybe wear a suit, or maybe he didn't have to take a CV with him, and so on. So I guess part of that is something that our generation has had to do. So maybe passing it forward or paying it forward.
But also, you'd be surprised at how many children still now, wouldn't have not had the. I still meet children who do not understand the difference between different universities. So the concept of Russell Group universities, non-Russell Group universities, what course to do, what will that lead to, what should the CV look like? The fact that we still have young men with law degrees turning up to an interview in a bright, shiny grey suit with a cup of coffee that they put on your desk, and you think, you've lost me before you've even started. And he may have the best degree in the world, but actually he's lost you at that moment because the unwritten rules of how you deal with this, the soft skills of how you get jobs and get on in life and get promotion is really what we're trying to work towards helping them do.
Note to self, get rid of shiny suit.
Grey suit.
Doesn't impress.
Not if you're going to get a job as a lawyer.
I'm not going to. One more chance of me being on the other side as a criminal.
But if you're going to be an entertainer, a shiny grey suit may work.
This is not entertainment. This probably, well, I'm glad you think of it as entertainment. There was a time when they started throwing Christians to lions as entertainment. There you go. So just as a Pakistani Muslim in politics, was there ever a pressure on you from your own people and community to kind of like, now you're in there, you've got to help us and do more for us? Do you kind of like get that kind of approach, or people expecting that of you?
Listen, if you're in politics, people will always expect something of you. The list of who needs a visa is never going to run out, is it really? But in terms of, kind of, do I speak for a community? Well, first of all, I'm not elected, so therefore I don't have a constituency. Secondly, I have never ever chosen to leave my identity outside the office. When I walk in, I hear ethnic minority politicians in the past, or female politicians who will say, "Oh, I don't do women's things," or "I don't do ethnic minority things," and I'm like, well, it's a part of who you are.
Exactly.
So when I walk into a room, people know that you're female, you're brown, your background. So therefore, why not bring that experience to the table? It's an additional piece of experience that you bring to the table. And I suppose that I do feel the need to speak out when I see injustice and when I feel that governments or whatever colour are making the wrong decisions.
Now you stood by those principles, and sometimes that's kind of not gone down well with everyone. Certainly, I know you've been outspoken about a number of things, or you've spoken about things, and maybe there are some from within the Muslim community who said, hang on, and you had suffered some abuse and so on from those folks. But it sounds to me as if it's for you, the truth is more important than a soundbite or an idiot reaction or just appeasing.
Oh, of course it is. I mean, look, politics is a pretty awful, godforsaken world. People who tell you this is a great place to be are lying to you unless they're kind of slightly weird in their personalities. This is a world where you don't see your family much. You're despised by large sections of the community. Most professional people will take a pay cut to do this, and therefore what is the purpose of and every aspect of your life is scrutinized and is in the public domain. So why would you be part of this world? Well, the only reason you should be part of this world is because something burns deep inside your stomach, which makes you feel like you want to implement change. And therefore my view in politics is make it count. For the time that you spend in this awful, godforsaken world, make it count. Otherwise, what is the point of being in this world? There are far better ways to enjoy life and earn a living and have a career and have fulfillment than being in politics.
That was a single worst advertisement for getting into politics, guys. So you heard it here.
No, that was a single. And it is, because what I say to people, because lots of young people will say to me, I want to get into politics. And I would say, well, why?
Yeah.
And the kind of plethora of answers you get, and I said to them, no, go away, get a life, have a proper job first, sort your life out, and then come to this because you genuinely have 1, 2, 3, 4 things that you really want to make a difference on, because most politicians will never ever make a scratch on the surface of history. If you go back and talk about the best politicians in the world and say, name me 3 things about Tony Blair, most people will say Iraq War, Iraq War, Iraq War. People will not even remember, big things about these huge politicians that we've had. So therefore, what I say to people is only enter this world if you genuinely feel passionate enough to be able to make a real difference. And speaking truth to power has got to be a fundamental. It's and I suppose that's where faith comes in for me. I don't consider myself to be a deeply religious person, but I consider myself to be a person of deep faith.
Okay.
And for me, I suppose, I consistently say, well, long after politics has come and gone, I've got to be able to live with myself. I've got to be able to look in the mirror and say, I made the right decisions and the right calls at the right time, and I remained true to myself.
Yeah, that's key to it. And by the way, it's not just politicians that never see their families and despised by lots of people. I'm despised by loads of people, and I never see my family. And that's just your family. And that's
why you don't see your family.
That's why I don't see my family, because exactly.
Don't invite Dal round for dinner.
Yeah, exactly. Who's that guy there, Mum? He's your dad. Yeah, well, we think he's your dad. But anyway, that's hang on,
help
please
the kids out watching.
Don't choke. So just getting all serious again, just when things were getting fun. Brexit. Now you, I believe, and again, whether my intel is wrong or right, were initially kind of oriented towards the Leave side of things, but then
I campaigned.
You campaigned.
I actually did believe that Britain could make its way outside of the European Union as a kind of big, open, hello world type of Brexit offering.
Okay.
And I felt that there was a way in which we could kind of keep our relationship with the European Union. It had to change. Look, the European Union is bureaucratically a nightmare, democratically removed from our lives, most people's lives, financially questionable about where all this money is going and how the accounts are dealt with. And actually it's quite protectionist in terms of its free market, top line is actually quite protectionist in terms of many of the markets within which it operates. So therefore, I did feel there was an alternative model, and we tried very hard for a very long time to effect reform from the inside. It wasn't working as quickly as it should have been, and therefore I did feel there was this potential alternative. But there was a big difference, Del, between those of us who were hello world Brexiteers and those of us who were little island Brexiteers. And in the end, it was the little island Brexiteers what won it. Because what we found was that the narrative that was being pumped out was, it'll keep the crazy Turks out, it will keep these crazy refugees out, we can send all these other people back home probably, it's all about immigration, the world has changed. And I thought that became a really toxic campaign.
And is that how you distance yourself from that?
Ultimately, I suppose what I did was I looked at the people who were lining up to support this position, from people like Nigel Farage to Katie Hopkins to Marine Le Pen. Marine Le Pen. And I kind of thought to myself, I wouldn't get on a night bus with these people, so why would I end up finding myself voting for the kind of vision that they're wanting to vote for? And yes, there were some great people in the Brexit campaign who were hello world Brexiteers, genuinely open people who wanted to deal with the issues around sovereignty and democracy. But I felt that in the end, the message that won it was a very divisive, toxic message. And I suppose, what I initially fundamentally believed that, for example, if you take our immigration policy should not be based upon how near you are to Britain. It should be based upon talent. So if you have fantastic IT workers from, India, they should be allowed to come here just as much as fantastic IT workers from, Bulgaria.
Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
But in the end, when I heard the rhetoric, I thought, I'm not convinced that those people who don't like Polish builders are going to be really open to IT workers from India.
No, they're not.
And so therefore, this is a bit of a nonsensical argument that we're starting to sell to people, because it genuinely isn't true in terms of the narrative that is coming out of sections of this Leave campaign. And so I just felt that I needed to distance myself from that.
Which, I mean, I think, again...
Got a load of grief for it.
I heard about the grief and so on. I mean, I think I know some of us as people of colour got grief. I mean, I got it, a week or so after Brexit, with people telling me, to go back to where I came from. And I did tell them I lived just about sort of 300 yards away. And I
they could come round for a cup of chai if they want.
They're welcome to, but, we've got our country back. And then when I explained I was born in the UK, they were like, I think what was the phrase, a dog born in a stable isn't a horse, which kind of like...
But what's really interesting is apparently the first, early man in Britain was black.
Of course they were.
It's really fascinating.
Of course they were. Didn't have any soap, couldn't clean himself. But no. So, but it is. I mean, yes, the discovery in Northern Europe recently of the fact that basically, if we go back far, and that's what I said to these guys. I'm not being funny, but guys, if this country, this island has, accommodated people from invaders from all over. So, chances if you go far back in history, none of you are pure
we're
white.
All comers in at some point.
Exactly.
But I think the discovery here was it Cheddar Man, they called him.
Cheddar Man,
yeah.
exactly.
He was dark-skinned.
Yeah, exactly.
So therefore, at what point do you assess who's...
Yeah, but people have a timeline, which is they want to go back to the 50s, maybe before, the Windrush and stuff came over, because Britain was pure before that, and then people put their own narrative on.
I mean, it's one of the reasons why I wrote my book, actually, last year, which was this tale, I called it The Enemy Within, A Tale of Muslim Britain. Okay. And it was all about tracking this journey between Islam and Britain and how long it went. And actually, the earliest encounters go back to the 7th century.
Right.
And so, the point that I made was, the Muslims have been coming for hundreds of years. Let's not get excited about the fact that we think they've suddenly now arrived. And that we have to go back through this long history and journey of where, there were moments when English kings were writing to Muslim sultans saying, come and help us with all these pesky people who are making our life difficult, and we'll take on board your faith, and so there are all these kind of moments of interaction which I talk about, which is saying, let's just remember our history, and let's remember all our histories and how we came to be here.
That's a fair point. Sorry, what was your book called again?
The Enemy Within.
The Enemy Within,
A Tale of Muslim Britain.
Right.
Paperback out now.
It's not an audio book yet, is it?
It's not an audio book. Everybody keeps saying, will you do an audio book?
Do an audio book.
I've got time to sit in a room. I've had for
Well, look, pay me, I'll read it.
You haven't got a Yorkshire accent.
Oh, blimey, okay.
And you wouldn't sound like a woman.
I've got to sound like, well...
You've got to sound like a woman with a Yorkshire accent.
There you go. Some things even I can't do. even I can't do. So there you go. So yeah, I was going to say that just going back to sort of the way Britain is today, and we've touched on this. I mean, obviously, some folks are peddling the kind of hate around post-Brexit and so on. What are your views on the things that are broken right now in Britain that need addressing urgently?
I think a sense of what it means to be a part of this nation. We've had a huge debate around British values, which I think is a very weird term.
Yeah.
I prefer the phrase British ideals,
yeah.
A kind of forward-looking vision of who we want to be rather than a dishonest account of who we think we are and have been. And I just feel like there's a real kind of lack of understanding of who it is that we want to be as a nation. We say we've got these values, and yet we fundamentally behave in opposition to those values. We fundamentally believe that everybody in this country should be equal and of equal worth and equal value, and yet in many ways the way in which we conduct ourselves doesn't support that. And I feel that we can be a better nation, and I think post-Brexit the nation has been much more fractious. The issues around devolution, the second potential talks of a second referendum, it's got all of these things have led to, but again, these are not new. If you go back through history, go back 200, 300 years, Britain was a much more fractured place then,
Oh, God, yeah.
than we are now. Within the United Kingdom, within England, you had many kingdoms. It wasn't just between the different nations. So I do feel that I think there has to be calm banter. There has to be a sense of, calm, inclusive, honest conversation about some of these really difficult issues, and a return to evidence-based decision-making, which I consistently talk about. The concept of the myth and fake news and false kind of stories is really worrying. I consistently, people will come and say to me, so this is a real problem. I'll say, okay, the lawyer in me says, let's go back to the evidence. Where's the evidence? What's it saying? What does, how have we come to find this evidence?
Yeah.
But I find, unfortunately, too much of our public discourse is based upon just outrageous statements being made by people who have a platform.
Well, unfortunately, that's the world we live in now with IT, social, and so on. And I mean, by the way, I am still alive. Those who think I'm dead, I'm alive. So I get
Why did that story go out?
That's fake news. Well, I'll kill myself off, just get the ratings up. But you can't. So, just looking at life. Had you not gone into politics and so on, is there something that really would have interested you to kind of tried outside of politics had life not taken this course?
I think probably what I really wanted to do was I wanted to work in theatre. I wanted to take the really old traditional English classics and I wanted to give them an ethnic twist, and I wanted to put them on stage. So I wanted to make Bride and Prejudice. That would have been my big thing. And you can imagine the conversation.
This is as a kind of writer-producer, as opposed to being on the stage.
Rather than being on the stage. And you can imagine, kind of pre-legal days when I was like, when my mum said, what do you want to be? And I got as far as, well, in the theatre. And she, it was like, right, you're going to be a lawyer.
Operating theatre, doctor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not that kind of a theatre, Mum. I don't like blood. So in some ways, I think if I'd followed my kind of dream, it would have been around that. But in a way, I'm really glad that Mum made sure that I became a lawyer because it allowed me to have a proper job and earn lots of money and give me the stability and the security that allowed me to then play politics. Because politics is a tough place to be, and I think having that financial security going into politics was important and remains important. But I suppose the other kind of real big passion is I just love interior design. I love houses. I think I always say that if I'd kind of had to do this again, it would be about creating the most beautiful properties and creating the most kind of wackiest designs.
Can you do something about these chairs, by the way? They're dreadful. No, joking. And the curtains, they've all got portcullises on them and so on.
The House of Lords is very kind of it's very limited in what it can and can't do.
Very House of Lords, it is. It's interior design. I can't imagine you sort of doing your Lawrence Llewellyn in here, but there you go. So, in terms of, I know you probably can't, or maybe you can. I don't know the kind of discourse for example, in Pakistan, the sort of politics and the agenda over there. What would you most like to change about things in Pakistan if you had the chance?
I think it's for me. I mean, I was the British Minister for Pakistan for 2.5 years. So I had a really interesting role where I was, my parents were born in Pakistan. Granddad came here in the 50s, and then years and years later, for his granddaughter to go back as the British Minister of Pakistan was actually really an interesting moment because you have this kind of understanding and connection to a place where effectively you're a minister for your own home in that place. And so I think it was, for me, one of the things I was always really clear about was staying out of the politics of Pakistan, because I think sometimes people can become affiliated to political parties and political movements within India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and I'm not particularly convinced that that's a helpful move. But I think if there was one single thing that I would change within Pakistan, and it's something actually I spoke about recently when I was there, and that's got to be about the rule of law applying to all within that nation. And that, I said that I have spent my whole life fighting for the equal value and worth of minorities in this country. And I feel that we need to spend just as much energy fighting for the equal worth and value of other nations with whom we have strong connections. And I just think that, the plight of minorities within Pakistan, the plight of minorities within India, the plight of minorities within Bangladesh, these countries that we have connections with, has got to be at the top of the list. And the rule of law and the application of the rule of law to all people in those nations, irrespective of their background, has got to be a fundamental.
And in Pakistan, is the minority more based around religion than cultural differences? Is it?
Well, no, I mean, look, you have religious minorities, so you have Hindus and you have Sikhs and you have Christians. In fact, they've recently just elected a Dalit woman to Parliament, which I thought was a really kind of positive move.
Just some of you, so that's a Dalit woman.
Well, I think she's Hindu,
yeah.
Dalit woman who's exactly to Parliament, and then of course there are minorities within Islam. So there are Shia minority communities, there are Ahmadi communities, there are lots of other minority communities within Pakistan as well. And for me, I just feel that this kind of rule of the majority
needs to be all inclusive.
Has a majority country is at its democratic best when it treats its minorities well, and I just feel that the rise of the kind of aggressive majority against minorities isn't just prevalent in Pakistan, but in India too.
In India, absolutely.
We're starting to see this kind of rise of Hindu fundamentalism as well. And I just feel that has got to, as people in this country, as British people of Muslim, Hindu, Sikh backgrounds, I think we have to raise our voice back to those countries and say, look, we demand the rights for minorities in Britain, but we also demand the rights of minorities in those nations.
Yeah, absolutely, that's fair. In terms of advice, what's the best bit of advice you think you've ever received?
Gosh, so many different kind of things in different aspects of your life.
Anything that sort of resonates that might... I know I apologise.
I suppose probably one of the most interesting pieces was from the late Benazir Bhutto, where she said to me, to really succeed, you have to overcome the fear of losing.
Okay.
And there are so many people who don't apply for a job or don't go for that big thing, because they kind of feel like, well, what if I don't get it? Well, you're worse off. You're no worse off for not getting a job than if you'd not applied for it. Okay. So why not apply for it? At least you've had a stab at it. So I think one of the things I say to a lot of young women especially is to say, look, overcome the fear of losing. To hell with it. Just go for it. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, at least you tried.
Okay. And what's the worst, the most rubbish advice you ever got, apart from talk to Del Singh?
Probably the most rubbish piece of advice I ever got was give up sugar.
Give up sugar?
Because that's a rubbish piece of advice, because I'm never going to do it.
But it's worth doing. It's
worth
doing, but it is a tough one to do.
Oh, give up roti. Give up carbs. All this kind of useless information I get, which probably is quite useful, but I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So, and your life's fairly full on. So, when you sort of switch off, what is it you kind of enjoy doing in order to kind of like calm down?
I don't switch off very well.
Okay.
So my kids always say, Mum's allergic to fun. Because they kind of feel like I'm constantly... I think my work gives me great pleasure. It gives me great joy. I think my charitable work gives me probably the most pleasure. Being busy kind of gives me a sense of focus and purpose. But then I suppose just, sometimes just going out for a walk with the dog just kind of switches you off. That's all you do.
Listen,
and I kind of talk to him, and I think the kids think I'm slightly mad, because when he misbehaves, I say to the dog, "Gadana ban," and they went, "It's not a donkey. You can't say Gadana ban to a dog. You can say it to us. But you can't
Does the dog translate? Because it was an English dog, so
I think he understands when I'm kind of saying Gadana ban, because he stops behaving like an idiot.
Oh, okay. You're doing a Dr. Dolittle thing. You can talk to the animals.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk to the animals.
Animals understand you far better than your kids do, I tell you that.
And it costs you less. But there you go. So just a few things kind of away from the sort of politics and so on. So can you think of the first piece of music you ever bought or kind of listened to or meant something to you?
I think it was probably something like, do you remember those Now 86 or whatever it used to be? I think it must have been Now 86 or Now 85 or something ridiculous.
So, was there a song or something that you might have bought that for or something?
My earliest memories of music have got to be Lata and Rafi. That was what my parents listened to.
Okay.
And
was it what was it that took your fancy? Because I heard all that Indian stuff, and I must admit I kind of think T-Rex was probably the first thing I probably probably bought, but there you go.
Well, I suppose we didn't really buy that much music. It was all cassettes, wasn't it? God,
It
do you remember
was.
the
It was.
cassettes?
You could buy, you could steal it, but it doesn't matter.
And suppose, but for me, I actually enjoyed the old Latan thing. I loved Qawwali's. I
Oh,
thought
okay.
the late Nusrat Fateh Khan was amazing. We also grew up in the era of daytime bangras. Didn't go to any of them. Just for the record, didn't go to any of them.
Not
So
gonna misquote
Alap and all that kind of period
Okay.
was the kind of big period of listening to music. And then I suppose it was things like Wham, wasn't it? And
yeah, listen, don't ask me. You tell me.
Yeah, so it was all this kind of there's lots and lots of kind of interesting music at that.
Now, I mean, is there an app on your phone? You're a device freak there. So, is there an app that you can't live without?
Find Friends.
Find Friends? What the hell's Find Friends?
Find Friends is this.
I don't. Obviously, I have no friends. That's probably what I'm doing wrong here.
Find Friends is the app where you can basically, you know exactly where all your friends are at one point, but I don't put my friends
That's
on
a
it.
stalker's charter.
Yeah, of course it is. That's why I love it. So Find Friends with my husband and all the kids on it is brilliant, because when your kids are away at university, you can just find friends and find out exactly what they're
I can
up to
see
at
why
any
your
one
kids are
point.
actually down on you now all of a sudden. God, if I was doing that's a stalkery app. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
scared.
So
I'm
I
scared.
go around saying to all my friends who've now got teenage kids, say, do you know this app called Find Friends? And so then there's all these friends' kids who now despise me across the country for introducing Find Friends to their parents. But our kids, to be fair, have been great about it, because ultimately, what it means is we're not constantly ringing them up saying, where are you? What are you doing? Are you all right? Are you safe? Have you got in? Have you not got in? Find Friends is one of those great apps, and we're on it. We're all
As opposed to
share
why
on
the hell are
it.
you out at 3 a.m?
Yeah.
Is the
Yeah,
kind
but I
of thing.
don't mind them being out at 3 a.m, as long as I know that they're safe.
well,
And actually,
yeah.
Find Friends is an app which keeps them safe.
Can we edit this bit out, by the way? Because my wife gets hold of this. It's going to be Find
Yeah.
Dell. Find Dell. Dell doesn't want to be found. Sometimes Dell doesn't want to be found.
So yeah, Find Friends.
Okay. So outside of music,
Spotify.
There you go. That's for the music side of
Sonos.
it.
Yeah, all sorts of apps.
That's your music list, your Wham. So, what about sort of big screen movies? Are you kind of a film fan? Do you like
Yeah, I do.
movies? And what sort of genre? Is it more Bollywood or is it Hollywood?
No, true stories. It
Okay.
doesn't matter whether they're Bollywood or Hollywood. The minute it says this is based upon true events, that's it, I'm hooked, I'll watch it. Because I kind of feel like it's adding to my knowledge.
Yeah, they do that on Fargo all the time.
Yeah.
This is based on true events.
Yeah.
Then they were. But, so is there
No,
a favourite? Is there a favourite film then in that case? That if you had to kind of
I think it'd have to be. I suppose it all depends on different times, doesn't it? Mother India's got to be a classic.
Mother
hasn't
India
it?
is a
Every
classic.
Sholay
Okay.
is a classic, in terms
twice
of
in one
growing
day,
up.
Sholay's come up. So yeah, okay.
So and more recently, kind of Dangal was just brilliant. So I think things like that in terms of Hollywood, I think Shawshank Redemption. You've got to kind of it's got to be
it's on
kind
people's
of,
list. It's
gotta
on
be
people's list as well.
What else would you kind of say? Schindler's List. I found haunting, but I suppose the big thing in our lives at the moment is
Go on.
we're waiting for Game of Thrones. I'll tell you what I did watch.
Go on.
The recent Black Panther.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Okay.
Absolutely brilliant.
No spoilers now, because
Oh, sorry, I can't do that. Okay.
So-
Well, I don't really like the sci-fi stuff, and
Okay.
I don't like. I mean, I go along to the Marvel stuff, because my husband likes them and my kids like them, and I sit there going, "This is so unrealistic."
But you like this
But
one.
I loved it, absolutely. And I tell you why I loved it. Not just for the black characters, the female characters were so strong.
Right.
I mean, the strong kind of, almost the stories kind of wrapped around these strong female characters. So no, I loved it.
A couple of things we've got here before we kind of wrap up and so on. I ask people about sort of heroes, heroines they've had, but I tend to sort of frame it along the lines of a dinner party. If you're holding a dinner party, you're allowed 3 guests from any era, dead or alive. Ideally, not family, because I know that, So, who would those 3 people be, and why would you have them along?
I suppose I'd like to have people of religious backgrounds.
Okay.
I think that would really fascinate me.
Okay.
And people who've made huge differences to history.
Okay.
So if I could have the Prophet Muhammad, Guru Nanak, and Pope Francis round the table,
Okay.
that would be a great conversation.
Well, you wouldn't eat anything because they'd be all praying before the food. The food would get cold.
But I would just love to hear their version of what it means to be genuinely understanding of your own faith and other people's faith.
Yeah.
I would love to have an interfaith conversation with those three people
This is
around
a conference,
the
not a
table.
dinner party, but
Yeah,
it
but I
sounds
just think it'd be
good.
the best dinner party.
Okay, and so you've got some very pious people around the table. You've had your food and all the rest of it. Now you want somebody who's maybe not so pious to actually do the dishes and clean up. Somebody that probably is quite horrible. Who would that be?
I think we should get Nigel Farage round to do the dishes.
Yeah, he's booked already. He's around Mines doing the garden, so you can't have him. There you go. But no, that's a fair shout. Now there's a film that I think is brilliant. If you haven't seen it, do
I'm
watch
gonna
it.
go see it.
So it's called Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. It is a great film, and Frances McDormand's one of my all-time female heroes. She did Fargo, which is brilliant. So if you haven't seen Fargo, watch that as well.
Yeah.
Now, if you had the chance to put a billboard outside somebody's house, place of work, or whatever, who's just not getting the message, whose place would it be, and what would the message say, and why?
I think I'd put it outside the White House.
Okay.
And I'd say, step away from the screen, Mr. President. Stop playing on your iPad and your iPhone. I think that's probably what I'd say.
Okay.
He's really going to have less screen time.
He needs to get some more sleep and a personality and a hair transplant. But anyway, all of those things aside, so there you go. So I'd probably put it outside the guy, the NRA, and actually tell him to really get a reality check there. So it's people don't kill people, guns kill people. So there you go. Just the final part before we wrap is Fishbowl.
Oh, is this like a
It's a
raffle?
self-inquisition.
Do I win a prize?
You don't. It's a self-inquisition here. So there are questions here. They are quite random.
I bet they're all the same question.
It is. It's like, can you put me in your will? No. But if you would select read out, I've done an extra large font now because people were telling me we're squinting here, Del. So if you could, I know. Read it out and then answer as honestly as you will. Go on.
Have you ever cheated in an exam?
There you go.
No, never. Can I do another one?
Of course you can. You can do as many as you like, but I mean, but you've got to give me more than no, I haven't. Go on.
What's the worst thing you've ever bought? Don't know. My ex-husband?
Oh, okay. Boom.
Sorry.
No, I like that. That's good. I wish I could do. I've got an ex-wife.
I didn't buy him.
I've got an ex-wife.
I didn't buy him. He didn't come from Thailand.
Yeah, bought him off.
But there was a visa involved. What's the worst present you have ever received, and why? Did you say anything about it?
Did you? If you got what's the worst present? Did you ever say anything about it to
do
the
you remember?
person?
You know those horrible water sets that people give on weddings. A jug and 6 glasses, and they're like really nasty fake crystal.
You got those.
Yeah, everybody gets them. You get 20 versions of them, don't you?
You do. But did you ever? We never complain though, do we?
No,
we
you just recycle them and give them to somebody else.
Yeah.
Oh God. Recall an embarrassing episode and how you got out of it, if indeed you did. I'll tell you what I did. Talking about recycling presents.
Go on.
Somebody bought me some flowers, and then straight after they'd gone, we had to go to my in-laws, one of my extended in-laws family, for something, and I hadn't had the time to get them anything, and so I took the flowers to their house. And I left the card inside. And it went around the whole family that I'd bought these flowers, recycled flowers, because inside it said something like, to Saeed, from obviously these people who'd come to our house. Yeah. And I'd taken them to somebody else's.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did something similar, except I took them off a lamppost where a crash site, they said, with sympathy. So anyway.
That's it. Oh, we're going to keep going.
We'll do a couple more.
What are you most afraid of? Cats?
You're afraid of cats?
Cats, yeah.
That's as in the animal, not the musical.
No, the animal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Ooh.
Saida, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting and bantering with you today. Thank you very much. Hope you didn't find it too much of an ordeal and so on. This is nonsense that we do. Wish you all the best, and all that remains for me, Del Singh, is say thank you very much for joining us for Late Night Banter, and look forward to seeing you again for some more next week.
Joining us on Late Night Banter. Trust you enjoyed the banter. And my guest next week is Dr. Sarah Jarvis, MBE, GP, BBC broadcaster, author and clinical director.